MODA Miami weekend 2026 is here, and it's time to make our way into the show field and take a look at the incredible selection of cars among different classes that they have on this year's golf course at the Biltmore Hotel. But of course, we're going to start right outside here in front of the valet parking at the hotel, where there are clearly some insane vehicles on display. So stick around and hope you enjoy the highlights from this year's MODA show in Miami 2026. So kicking things off on a high note here, we have right outside in front of the hotel the Zinger 21C VMAX model. This is the low drag long tail version of the 21C compared to the track variant that has the high downforce configuration with the big wing. This car, of course, incredibly alien-like with its tandem style two-seating in the center of the car. And of course, the parent company famous for their computer engineered really process of building the different components and suspension geometry that goes into this car that then gets 3D printed. It really feels like a big revolutionary step in the world of just car manufacturing in general, being displayed here on this insane hypercar with a small displacement mid-mounted V8, massive intakes you can see there feeding that engine. Also these low drag aero disc style wheels applied to this specific spec. It really just looks otherworldly, almost like a fantasy Hot Wheels car come to life. So cool to see that out here to kick things off. But anyway, we will move on and see some of the other highlight cars that are outside the hotel here. I don't know exactly what this is. Some sort of 911. At first glance, I thought maybe it was the GT3R Rennsport, but that isn't the case. This is some sort of prototype called GTH. I feel like I've seen or heard of this somewhere online, but I don't quite know much about what I'm looking at here. So if anyone knows in the comments, please educate me on what exactly this thing is. It says GTH at the back, obviously a 992 911 hiding underneath, built into something bespoke here. Then another interesting car that I am excited to see here is a Lexus LFA with the Nürburgring edition package equipped for the extra aerodynamics and performance. Lighter wheels, looking pretty stealthy in the black, but you can see the massive wing in the back there taking the place of the standard LFA's active rear wing. Very cool. And then some sort of custom Porsche here again that I don't know what it is. I would assume just by the looks it comes from the Gambala era because it's some sort of 930 underneath. But again, not really sure what the deal is there. Pretty intense looking nevertheless. Then some other more legendary 911s, 911R, 993 Turbo in Arena Red, 993 Club Sport RS, original Lamborghini Murcielago, E-Type. Moving over here, one of my favorite 997s, the GT2 RS, the first GT2 RS we got. I think around 700 of these were built. The most insane iteration of the 997 before it bowed out. And we have a LaFerrari in front of a 296 GTV. Moving over here for a minute, we've got a couple of Porsches, some sort of Flachbau 911 SC cab here. And 356 Speedster, that's beautiful. Wow. And then over here, one of the hot modern hypercars from Koenigsegg, the Jesko, in the Attack configuration with the aerodynamic package for track usage compared to the low drag, high speed, absolute configuration. But this one here with the Attack aerodynamics, you can see especially with the unique rear wing and fin design here. It almost has this boomerang shape to it. And of course it's active, pretty wild. Full bare carbon on this one, of course. Some amazing creations here in the retro mods category, starting with this E30 BMW M3 by Renner. This was a SEMA car, and the interesting thing about this is they put the E60 V10 into that build. Pretty wild. But I am probably most interested in this car here, one of the 9 produced 2010 Alfa Romeo TZ3 Stradales by Zagato, a collaboration between the Italian brand and the famous coach builder Zagato that they built off of the Dodge Viper platform at the time. So this You can tell from the silhouette is the Viper underneath with the V10 engine, and built, of course, as a special project to commemorate the classic TZ race cars that Alfa Romeo made back in the day, like the Giulia TZ, and then the follow-up, which was the TZ2. So here we have the TZ3 with its evocative shape at the rear end and camtail design, speaking to those classic racers. Never seen one of these before, and it is just so wild. I especially love how the windshield, or the window rather, just wraps entirely around the car. You can see, I mean, obviously there are pillars underneath for structural purposes, but they designed the glass to basically wrap around the entire side and rear of the car. So the roof, the famous Zagato double bubble roof design that you can see, is basically just an isolated piece of bodywork on the top. That is so cool. I believe there was also a racing version of this, the Corsa model. So this one is the Stradale for the street version. That is incredible. I think it's beautiful. So many of the Zagato creations are just incredible. And this one's no different. And then we have next to it another project from Lanzante, the 911 Tag Turbo with the Formula One derived engine shoved in the back, creating quite a machine. And then a really legendary build from the JDM world, the Mark IV Supra by Top Secret, producing over 1,000 horsepower. Top Secret made a number of wild builds from Toyota and other brands in the day, but they are most well known for the Supra that you see here. Another special model here, most famous potentially from one of its debuts on Top Gear, is the Eagle Low Drag GT, built by Eagle, the Jaguar Restomod firm, to commemorate some of the old lightweight Jaguar E-Type racers from back in the day, in this very interesting finish that's like sort of a graphite chrome, and of course wide body lightened approach to the E-Type coupe, built for the modern era with modern performance and enhancements. And then next to that here, something else really special, paying tribute to one of the beloved Alfa Romeos, the Giulia GTA by Totem Automobili. And this is not just a, true one-to-one Restomod like some of the Alfaholics products, but really just a fully new vehicle. You can tell completely bespoke bodywork that's longer and wider, while still paying tribute, of course, to the original with its overall shape and the wheels, but still with some very unique aesthetic creative liberties that they've taken, especially at the rear end here. You can see this sort of pinched rear end with these small taillights, looking very different from the original. That's amazing.
They were selling
very nice.
They were selling this for like $1 million new over a decade ago.
Some incredible cars here in the Supercar Skittles class at MODA. Of course, we have a Diablo SV, amazing. And we also have an orange roof Turbo R from the 993 gen, also amazing. GT3 RS here, looks like a 4-liter model. And then next to that, an SLR Sterling Moss from the Mercedes-McLaren collaboration in red. This is wild. I've never seen any of these that weren't silver or white, even online. I didn't know what kind of colors they put on these because there's only 75 of them. And this just looks incredible in red. Wow, like that is just so damn cool. I mean, this is, there's so many supercar-based speedsters now between the McLaren Elva and Aston Martin V12 Speedster, Bentley Bacalar. Like, this craze has gone nuts in recent years, but this was way back in like 2009 when Mercedes made this limited version of the SLR. Excuse me, this is actually a 2010, I guess, was what they were officially all the model year of. But man, the Sterling Moss is just so cool, and it was, again, limited to 75. Most of these other ones today are made in much larger numbers. But wow, look at that, with like the central sort of truss that's going through the cabin there, and the speedster humps and roll hoops, the active carbon little spoiler there at the back. That is so cool. Wow. But then something even wilder here, if we keep moving along past some of these McLarens, of which there's an Elva I was just mentioning, an Elva with the windshield actually. That's interesting. Most of them, to my knowledge, did not have the windshield included. But then there's this thing, which most of you probably will have no idea what this is. This is an Ascari, the same brand that made stuff like the KZ1 and the A10. But before they made those cars, they had their first supercar, the Akasi? Don't know if I'm saying that completely correctly, but it's got a mid-mounted BMW engine. There are only 17 of these made. I knew of this car, but I genuinely thought it just barely made it past like the prototyping stage. But apparently they made 17, they sold 17, and this is one of them. It's so wild. It looks like, you know, kind of like a hodgepodge of a bunch of different styling cues, but it also kind of looks very like Le Mans prototype in its silhouette with the pinched cabin and the tapering rear and like the sort of like built-in ducktail that comes up at the rear behind that or underneath that wing on the engine cover. Obviously taillights that are shared with something else. But yeah, that is the beginning of the Ascari line of cars. I think they're defunct now. I don't think they're doing anything or, you know, even trying to produce anything, but they were around and they made some pretty cool stuff. This is in the late 90s before they made their more notable cars. But that's quite a find. Really cool. Without a doubt, one of the most beautiful cars ever made here on the show field, the Alfa Romeo 8C Competizione. Just such a seductive shape on this car, and I don't think they've topped this with anything else in the modern era, despite some other nice cars they've been making, like the 4C and other stuff like that. But the 8C is just on another level. We'll never get tired of seeing one of those. And then moving away from that, we have some very interesting Mercedes-Benz cars here. There's sort of a Mercedes-Benz theme at MODA this year. We have one of the Gullwing SEC builds here next to a red car from the Black Series line, the C63 Coupe Black Series. And then we've got another car here from Squadra Lupo, a 190E Turbo Evo 2 Evolution here. And what do we got? More SEC here, AMG. Oh, this is cool. We have effectively the old E-Coupe, a 300 CE, I think, with an AMG body kit, 3.2 AMG here. That's really cool. And some sort of maybe Rentec tune. Yeah, Rentec tune S76R here from the W124 S-Class. That's pretty special. And let's see, moving forward. Here's that Turbo 2 Evo here. Look at this green SEC. That's pretty cool. This is SEC custom wide body, 560. And looks like another Rentec AMG vehicle here of some sort, a 500 SCL 6-liter AMG. To get a closer look at this, this looks menacing. The color matched AMG wheels there look especially cool, and look at this bright red full interior here, custom. Red pinstriping. That's very cool. And another Black Series car, one of the really wide boys, the SL65 Black Series. Love that. The fixed hardtop, of course. No convertible here like in your standard SL AMG models. That's sweet. So let's look at some of the insane hypercars lined up. Per usual, we've got a number of Singer 21Cs here in the downforce configuration. You can see the shorter overall bodywork compared to that VMAX model we saw up front. But this one might be the star up here. This is one of just 8 Pagani Huayra Imola Roadsters. Obviously, I mean, look at this thing. It looks just intense at all angles. In every possible measure, they have added aero and additional touches and custom wheels and bodywork and just sculpted components here. I mean, look at this rear clamshell and the central intake here from the roof scoop, merging into that shark fin with these gold accents and very sparkly paint. This is wild. Not everyone's cup of tea with the aesthetics of what they did to the Imola, but of course they made coupes and then roadsters. I think there were 5 coupes, maybe, and then 8 of these Imola Roadsters. So incredibly rare find in the Pagani universe. That is pretty insane. And then looks like we have Some more Wyras over here tucked away with a Utopia under this cover. And just surrounded by hypercars here behind me. Porsche 918 Spider, one of the Bugatti Mistrals, and another really cool Bugatti here, the Chiron Super Sport with its long tail, low drag design. And then moving along, this is that Praga Bohema, their newest supercar. Compared to the smaller R1R track vehicle they made previously, this is looking very inspired by stuff like the Aston Martin Valkyrie. I believe this uses a GTR V6. Pretty dramatic looking. And road legal. This is not a track-only vehicle, so you can drive this on the street. And we've got a cream color LaFerrari. That's pretty interesting. We've got some other classics over here, another CGT. We've got a McLaren F1. In fact, I believe this is the F1 from the Revs Institute Museum in Naples, Florida, that I saw when I visited. Yep, I see their sticker up there on the windshield, so saw this one before. That's cool. And then a very nice Koenigsegg over here, an Agera RS with a deep blue carbon and these gold accents, almost making it look like the Agera S Hundra that they made before this to celebrate the 100th Pagani car produced, or excuse me, Koenigsegg produced. That's pretty cool. Love the Ageras in general, the whole line. And that's just a really cool spec. You can see up close this RS badging, as well as some of the other gold sections. I don't know if these might be gold leaf inlays on the specific points of this car in the center point of delivery here, as well as the badge too. That's pretty cool. I don't know how to spot that especially, but I know they did that on the Agera S Hundra. Maybe this owner was originally inspired by something similar for this RS. Really cool. Over here, some other stuff. We've got a Chiron Persport over there. We've got one of the 40 Bugatti Divos right here. We've got another Chiron. Is this a Super Sport? Yeah, it looks like the longer Super Sport model here with the entirely revised rear end with the stacked exhaust, massive long diffuser, a P1, McLaren P1, and then we've got Lamborghini Sian Coupe and another Koenigsegg Jesko in the Attack configuration. You can see a little more clearly here with this silver paint and the carbon two-tone with these sort of acid green accents thrown around it, making the carbon fiber aero pieces even more dramatic. Wild. I glanced at this Chiron Persport earlier, but wanted to come back and revisit it because they just uncovered a few additional Bugattis here after the rain passed through. And as a result, we have almost the entire lineage of the Chirons out here, because we have the Persport in this dark burgundy carbon matching this Mistral in the same spec, one of the 99 examples. And then we have the Divo we saw earlier, one of the 40 higher performance models based off of the Chiron. And then we have another Mistral here in deep blue carbon next to the dark blue carbon Chiron Super Sport that we saw earlier, which means two things. I guess one, we have 3 Mistrals at MODA right now between these two and the other black one at the other end of this line. And then also, again, we have nearly all of the Chiron incorporated models here outside of course, the base model and I guess the Chiron Sport. And I guess you could count one of the 10 Centodiecis, the few off series that paid homage to the EV110. But all the primary models nearly are here together in a row, which is incredible to see. All in amazing specs. The Divo in white is especially stunning, but also the matching pair of, again, this Mistral and the Chiron Persport in this deep burgundy, almost like red wine colored carbon, two-tone with the black carbon. Just looks absolutely stunning put next to each other here. And overall, just an insane assortment of Bugattis at MODA this weekend. We have a pretty interesting selection of Restomod cars here at MODA this year, starting with this one. It's one of my favorites, the HWA Evo. Of course, their interpretation of the famous 190E Turbo 2 or Turbo Evo 2 that we saw just a moment ago. And HWA, if you're not familiar, a German firm that behind the scenes have been the masterminds engineering many of Mercedes-Benz's own factory-entered race cars and other hypercar, supercar special projects. I believe a lot of the GT3 vehicles from the SLS and the AMG GT came from HWA, among many of their older touring cars and GT1 cars and so on. I don't know the full list of cars in their portfolio that they've built for Mercedes-Benz, but they have decided to throw their hat in the Restomod ring that's ever popular with their own interpretation of a car they know well. And it looks truly tasteful to the original, I must say, just with the proper boxy wide body stance, the wheels, the racing inspired wheels, and of course all the modern touches you'd expect while keeping it true to the original. Look at the interior, for example, and all the bespoke switch work you see, and the steering wheel, the manual transmission, of course. You can see some of the badging there from HWA, the custom seats. Really cool project, and awesome to see it here next to another Restomod project we know well from Chimera, the Evo 37. Evo 37 or Evo 38, I'm not sure how to tell the two apart, but they've been iterating on it. Looks like this is actually a 38 that's got the little badge there in the grille. But of course they started with this as Evo 37, paying tribute to the Lancia 037 rally car, and now they're continuing to refine it based on customer feedback with the Evo 38. Moving along, another new one that I'm interested to see is this, the Evoluto F355. Of course, their imagining of a Ferrari F355 Berlinetta GTB. And again, styling touches and aesthetic changes, especially in the interior. Look at that. Of course, you keep the legendary gated manual, but everything else different from a standard F355. Carbon fiber bodywork, and some people are kind of unsure about the design because, of course, the F355 itself is one of the most beautiful Ferraris in the modern times.
R770.
But I think they did it justice. I really like the look of it. Just take a look at the work back here in the engine bay and the rear end with the modernized taillights and grille and rear bumper. I think it looks spectacular. And some awesome cars here in the Breakout era section of the show field. Starting with this, a silver Diablo GT, my favorite Diablo and one of my favorite Lamborghinis. How cool would it be to daily something like that? Next to a Diablo SV, I believe this one comes from Ed Bolian. Very interesting color on that one. Di Tommaso Pantera GT5, the best iteration of the Pantera, and therefore probably the best Di Tommaso in my mind, with the wide body motorsports inspired kit and aero at the rear, massive wheels, deep dish rims at the back. So cool, love one of those. Countach anniversary car here. And then this one next to it is pretty interesting. This is of course, the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, the old one from the 70s, a Volante model in particular. But this one is special because it has the X-Pack performance package, which is quite a rare and valuable thing to have on these cars. To be honest, I didn't even know they had X-Packs fitted to the Volante convertibles. I knew about the rarity of the X-Pack coupes for this car, but that is quite a special Aston, looking as good as ever. And we've got another Flockbau 911 Turbo here, next to the 90s Bugatti, the EB110 Super Sport. Love these. People, again, kind of thought they were ugly and weird, even to this day, but this is just so cool. I love the 5-dot intake there on the sides that denotes the Super Sport models, and the unique wheels, and just the overall aesthetic in the back with those vents and the taillights. And peeking into the quad turbo V12 there, is so much of it is exposed, which is just awesome. But this is such a special car. And then we've got another Lancia Delta HF Integrale. I think this one comes from Squadra Lupo. And a Porsche 924. And we've got the GMA T50 here from Gordon Murray Automotive. Of course, harking back to his definitive project in the McLaren F1, especially in this shade of orange. And both in the design and the silhouette and the overall philosophy of this car evokes the F1, of course, with the central driving position flanked by the two seats, the luggage compartments here on these panels that will open up above on the sides next to the engine. Of course, the rear-mounted fan being the new interpretation added to this formula here for aerodynamic and downforce benefits at the back of the vehicle. But naturally aspirated, mid-mounted V12, and I believe they still hold the record for the fastest revving production engine developed with Cosworth. The masterminds over there can make quite an engine and just have it ring out to an insane number. And this thing is just so cool. I think from what I've seen, the design of the T50 appears to be slightly polarizing to some people, but I think it's perfect. It effectively modernizes the F1 design, which has aged beautifully itself. So I don't mind it. I think it looks fantastic, and it's just such a cool philosophy of a car, regardless of how it looks, because it is going to be such a performer and one of the great modern cars. Looking back in 30, 40 years, this will be a legendary machine. Of course, Hennessy are here with a pair of their F5 Revolution coupes powered by the twin-turbo V8, making a massive 1,355 horsepower in the Revolution configuration, all going to the rear wheels. An immensely capable and probably also scary vehicle to drive, with an immense sound from that V8 engine that they've developed. Here's another one here in this interesting sky blue spec with the American flag center stripe running down the middle of the car. The Porsche Blanc collection here at MODA takes some inspiration from the famous white collection, and therefore we have a pretty interesting selection of white and white shade Porsches here. We got 911R, we've got another 997 GT2 RS, we've got 992 Sport Classic with a very interesting spec, almost like a cream color here, very cool. And then we've got another Flockbau 911 Turbo. It's another look at the Sport Classic that they brought back for its second iteration. A Singer reimagined 911 here, and then here is the first iteration of the Sport Classic from 997, the 2010 911 Sport Classic. I think these were only sold in other markets. I don't think any of them made their way into the US market at the time, so I'm assuming this is a show and display car here that we're seeing. Moving along, another Euro and rest of world exclusive here was the 996 GT3 RS. Of course, we had the GT3 as the first GT3 Porsche offered, but we didn't get the RS car that everyone else got until its successor, the 997, came along. But here's a rare look at the first RS car from Porsche. And then one of the best RS cars here, the 997 GT3 RS 4-liter in its signature white livery with the silver decals. Amazing. And then 991 GT2 RS, the second GT2 RS we got. And then pivoting a bit here from the Porsches, we have a very cool retro Le Mans race car, the Viper GTS R. Always love the racing classes like this where they were just throwing street cars out on the Mulsanne Straight. Really cool to see that. Some awesome classics, of course. Post-war sports closed category that we're looking at here with the DB4 Series 1 from Aston Martin, Lancia Stratos, and here a Bizzarini. This is beautiful, 5300 GT Bizzarini. Look at just the bodywork and the rear glass work on the back of this car. So exceptional. Next to an Isogrifo. And then what else do we have here? Looks like some touring Superleggera styled vehicle here from Maserati. Yeah, this is the Maserati Sebring. Oh, excuse me, it wasn't touring. This was Vignale that styled this car. That's beautiful. One of their vintage Grand Tours. And then over here, a favorite of mine, the Di Tommaso Mangusta. built as a response to their rivalry with Ford at the time. Alejandro Di Tommaso came up with the Mangusta to kill the Shelby Cobra. And this was what came of that, a beautiful mid-engine GT car that came before the Pantera with this split horizontal folding, or I guess vertical folding engine compartment here, showing right in to that V8 with, look how much you can just see of everything. That's so cool. The velocity stacks sticking up there, massive exhaust pipes. Love these. These are just such a beautiful silhouette. And look at those massive rear tires. And similar to last year, we have an incredible lineup of Ferraris for the Maranello Formula side of the show field here, starting with this 599 GTO, the limited high performance version of the 599, and a 430 Scud in a very interesting sort of pastel pearlescent yellow here. Very interesting spec on that one. And moving along from the Icona series, a Daytona SP3 in green, interesting. 360 Challenge Stradale, Ferrari F512M, the end of the Testarossa line here. Love that. I used to think these cars were hideous and weird, and maybe they are, but now I think they're so cool. It's the ultimate Testarossa. 550, F355 GTB, and 458 Speciale, one of the great modern naturally aspirated mid-engine V8 Ferraris, next to its successor, the 488 Pista Spider. I obviously focus on the modern stuff on my channel, but I don't want to ignore this incredible row of vintage Ferraris here next to the modern stuff, starting with this 250 GT Berlinetta Lusso, one of the purest shapes in the 250 series, in my opinion, finished in this incredible shade of gold here. Reminds me of Porsche's PTS Aztec gold color, but that just looks stunning. Usually these are red or black or silver. Never seen one in a shade like that, and it is incredible. And then moving along here to the car that succeeded the 250, one of Ferrari's most evocative shapes that they've ever made, the 275 GTB. Just love the style of these. Of course, it's more of an evolution compared to a full-on new shape and silhouette coming from the 250, but I just love the styling details with those vents next to the hood and the matching louvers behind the window there. So cool. Moving along the row here, we have a 250 GT California Spider here of some sort, and then a very special convertible Ferrari in the mix over here, the high-performance NART Spider for North American Racing Team, full name being the 275 GTS/4 NART Spider. Only 10 of these in existence, making it exceptionally rare and valuable. The high-performance open-top version of the 275 at the time, which was kind of a big deal back then. It wasn't like it is now, where Ferrari makes, you know, a Pista Spider and a 458 Speciale, Aperta, and all these open-top variants. This was sort of new ground at the time. Really cool. And then moving along to some others, we have a 330 GTC and 250 GT TDF, also known as Tour de France. Very cool. And let's a closer look at that. And we've got some other cars here that are wrapped up a bit from when it was raining earlier today. And then a Dino down here at the end. Some amazing cars here brought in from the Graham Rahal Performance Dealership outside of the Indianapolis area. Starting with this, of course, a 918 Spider in a beautiful shade. And then we have this car that we saw out in front of the Biltmore Hotel. I looked it up and learned a bit more about this. This is the RML Group GTH, which stands for GT Hypercar. Basically an homage project limited to 40 units to pay tribute to some of the older GT1 class of racing, with a 992 Turbo S 911 underneath, turned into this dramatic shape with the racing silhouette and body kit and aero work, finished in this crazy shade of purple. Again, they're only going to make 40 of these, and Graham Rahal have brought one of them out here. And I think they cranked up the engine in the Turbo S to about 920 horsepower, so it's going to be quite a monster car. And then here we have another interesting car. I believe This is a one-of-one situation we're looking at here. This is a roof CTR, but it's been fitted with an Evo package. I honestly didn't even know that this was a thing for the original CTR Yellowbirds, but apparently this one had been sent back to be given this wide-body Evo package and this fantastic shade of orange, looking incredible. It almost looks like a blend of the CTR Yellowbird and the CTR Anniversary cars and some of the aesthetics, but that's awesome. And then here we have one of the limited 993 Gen GT2 911s for the homologation class that they needed in the 90s. They built a very limited series of these, badged technically as a 911 GT. Of course, we all know this as the GT2. This is an insane color called Sunoco Blue, and I've just always loved the dramatic look of these, the original GT2s, with these riveted fenders stuck on from the factory, just like the race car, looking like something you'd find out of RWB, but just such a dramatic vehicle and one of the great retro modern Porsches here. An additional selection of cars has just rolled in for the MODA field as part of the 100 Club, and we've got some pretty interesting stuff out here that has joined the show, starting with this no ordinary Aventador here. This is the LP720 Anniversario, marking the 50th anniversary of Lamborghini's brand founding, and they only made 100 of these in coupe form and 100 in roadster form. Subtle design differences with a slight power bump compared to the LP700 at the time. Pretty interesting to see that. And moving along, of course, lots of different Porsches and Lambos and Ferraris, but there's another interesting Aventador over here that I wanted to take a peek at, which is this one here. You recognize the colorway probably from the Miura, because this is the Lamborghini Aventador Miura Homage, marking the 50th anniversary since the Miura debuted to start the V12 flagship for the Lamborghini brand. And they pretty much all were in this colorway, I believe. There may have been others similar to other Miura two-tone colorways like this, but the only ones I've ever seen in person or pictures of are like this, with the classic orange over the gold and matching gold wheels. And you can see the signature Miura 50 badge here at the bottom, marking the significance of this limited production model, of which they only made 50. Very cool. Next to that, we have Mercedes-Benz 1000 SEC AMG, the wide-body special commission build of the SEC coupe from back in the day when AMG was not part of the Mercedes brand yet, but building specific customer request tunes of certain cars. Just badass. One of the coolest AMGs of all time in my book. And then a legendary JDM car here, R33 Skyline GTR. And we'll move past that to some other interesting stuff back here. There's that LFA Nürburgring edition car we saw parked outside the hotel earlier. And a very interesting McLaren 675 LT customized by MSO. This remains my favorite of the LT McLarens, and it looks like this livery is intended to pay tribute to the 90s Marlboro McLaren F1 liveries they had at the time. So that's pretty distinct. And then we've got Ford GTX1, currently covered up because of some of the rain we're getting here, but the open top Roadster Special variant of the original first gen Ford GT. Love that. And then we've got first gen Lamborghini Gallardo Superleggera next to a wild customized wide body E30 M3 by Gambala, known for their wacky creations and their visual flair, of which this is no different. Excuse me, this actually isn't an M3, it's a 325i underneath. But of course, part of the E30 series of chassis here, 1986, customized by Gambala with these insane rounded but heavily sculpted wide bodies that merge up to this spoiler at the rear. And you can just see the dramatic effect of how much more width they put onto the bodywork there from that angle. We've got another interesting car here brought in from Prestige Imports, a KTM Crossbow GTX or GT2, not sure. This is probably the GTX because the GT2 was the track-only version. That's the GTX. It is a really crazy Batmobile-like looking thing. This is in a deep shade of purple carbon here. Pretty cool. Still using the Audi straight 5-cylinder engine on these, like the normal KTM crossbows.
None of them are fogged up.
Moving past the pink Urus Performante to some other cars over here. We've got a 992 911 Turbo 50th Design 50 edition, or whatever they called these. They were a special tribute model they made for the 911 Turbo series. You can see it's got some decals on here for the Heritage design package, along with the white wheels with the classic look, and the Turbo 50 badge there. You can see at the back. And then keep going here past a sort of pistachio green 992 GT3 RS, and we have another Koenigsegg Jesko in the attack configuration. Really interesting spec there with exposed carbon, red painted accents on the trim, and the signature carbon fiber lightweight wheels from Koenigsegg, looking pretty sharp there. And then moving along, let's see what else we have. Testarossa, some of the Mercedes-Benz supercars over here, SLR McLaren, and an SLS AMG Gullwing. Next to another 675 LT coupe. Really nice shade of yellow on this one. Love that. Looks very tasteful. But yeah, those are some of the interesting cars that have just joined the field for the 100 Club. Moving along, got even more up front with some additional Ferraris. Looks like a Pista Spider here. And also BMW Z8. And some interesting blue Porsches there. 991 GT2 RS. And then a pair of Carrera RS cars up front. Love these shades of blue. Can't remember what they all are, but they're fantastic. And then moving along to a couple of legendary cars right at the end here. 918 Spider, and of course the F40. Crazy show when the F40 is far from the wildest and rarest thing here, of course, because they made over 1,000 of these. And that was MODA Miami 2026, the third ever show here for MODA, and the second time I've come out here. No question, it was just as good as last year. So I'm super glad I took the trip down for this weekend show. Incredible selection of cars, and I hope you enjoyed seeing just some of the highlights. There's obviously way more here that I would never be able to fit into a video, modern and vintage, so many cool things. So definitely recommend it if you've been considering going to MODA. But until next time, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content and let me know what you thought of this video. I'll see you next time.